Hi again then guys, and welcome to another car review from the second installment in the Project Gotham Racing franchise, and this is a car which you don't see in too many games. In fact, even back in the 2000s when this was released, this particular variation still wasn't in that many games, and that is of course the Spider variant of the Ferrari 360 Modena. Now the coupe version did feature in a few different games, notably obviously Forza, Project Gotham, others as well. This one though, the open top version, not so much, and although I do personally wish that more racing games featured convertibles, especially in the way that Test Drive Unlimited does, and TDU2 in particular, where you could for instance drive a Mercedes SLR Roadster and actually put the roof up or down, I always love that. It's a cool feature to have, but of course in a strict racing game rather than an arcade or a cruising game like TDU is, it does make more sense to have a hardtop. 9 times out of 10 they have better performance than the open top versions, they are lighter, coupes also have better body rigidity for obvious reasons. It's just the obvious choice. If you're gonna choose one for competition, you should always go for the hardtop. However, that's not to say that an open top can't be good, and this is a perfect example of that, because even though the specs are in some ways not quite as good as the coupe version, which is also in the game and it's also in the same category of car, that's the supercar class, the 360 Modena has the same speed rating, which is a 6 out of 10, that seems fair enough. The acceleration on the coupe is superior, that checks out as well, that should be the case. It has an 8, this one has a 7. As far as the drift ability goes, interestingly, and this kind of surprises me actually, the coupe also has a higher rating again. It has an 8, whereas this has a 7. That's a curious thing to me. I would have thought that the lower body rigidity would give this one, if anything, a drift advantage, but apparently not, at least with Project Gotham physics. And last but not least, the handling once again goes to the coupe, which has an 8 out of 10 to this car's 7. Now, interestingly, this car, the 360 Spider, is not the best in the supercar class in any way. It's good across the board, but it's not the strongest at anything. The coupe, on the other hand, actually is the strongest in that class in two ways. Both the drift score and the handling score of 8, respectively, are the best in class. This one falls just short of that on both counts, and somewhat unfortunately does not lead the pack because of that alongside its hardtop brother. Now, as I said, that is by no means to say that the Spider cannot win races and that it's not good. In fact, of the two, I would choose the open top, both in real life and in the game, because there are certain cars that you don't necessarily need them to be the best thing around to enjoy it. And I've always been a fan of open top sports cars and supercars, and this is one such example. Looks-wise, I would definitely give this car the edge, but of course that's down to personal preference as to whether you like the look of an open top or not. To me, there are just certain cars that kind of suit the shape. Now, as far as this one goes, my overall thoughts on the 360 Spider, in particular not the hardtop version, are that it is smooth, it is surprisingly forgiving. Actually, you'd think that a mid-engine rear-wheel drive Ferrari could be maybe a little bit leery, especially with the lower body rigidity and the higher weight, but it's actually not. It can be a little bit slippery, which again is not surprising at all. It is a rear-wheel drive Ferrari after all. And so in terms of recommending or not recommending the car, it really does come down to the fundamental question of whether you want the best choice or if you want the more personal, fun choice. And what I mean by that is, factually speaking, the hardtop is the better car. For performance, for winning races, it does have a slight edge. Not a massive one, of course, but an edge nonetheless. If you prefer the open top though, if you want the style associated with that, and if you prefer the appearance, well then of course that will be the choice for you. Now I will always tend to go for the second of those if at all possible, because I would much rather drive a car that I love rather than a car which will just win. There are plenty of cars that can win, but I like to choose the car that I love the most and then make it win, even if it's not the best thing around. So that really is the choice that you need to make when it comes to, for instance, choosing the harder open top, but even just whether or not you want to choose the 360 in general. There are certainly other great cars in the category as well. The supercar category in PGR2 is, after all, one of the most competitive in the game. You've got stuff like the Porsche 911 Turbo, the Corvette Z06, the Viper GTS, and even one of the most interesting unicorns in the game, the Delfino Feroz. Now, those cars are all great in their own right, and as I said, the only significant advantage that the Ferraris have, and this one not quite as much as the hardtop, is that handling side of things, which is interesting because they pair the handling with the drifting as well, which almost seems like something of a contradiction. How can it be a really good drift car but also a really good handling car at the same time? To me, I would usually give the edge to something like a TVR, and considering that there is a TVR Tuscan in this class, and yet somehow that doesn't have the highest drift score, that seems kind of weird to me, but you know, fair enough if that's what they want to do. A Ferrari is certainly not a bad drift machine, and for me, I've always liked the 360 more than the F430, so I do find it an interesting option to have in the game, both in hard and soft top form. Now we are going to look at the hard top in future at some point, so it will be interesting to see what my thoughts are more specifically on that car, but for now, I like this one. I'm glad that they've got it in the game. As I said, you don't see the 360 Modena in really any games these days. There's probably the odd one that I'm not thinking of, but generally speaking, if any game does feature it, like Forza for instance, they tend to go for the more obvious challenge Stradale version. And of course, as great of a car as that is, it is sometimes nice to have a less obvious or maybe even slower and more understated and what I would say more clean design version, such as this one. Ultimately, it's your choice. What you want, whether it's performance or style, whether it's fun or just flat-out race-winning ability, of course, it's down to you. But those are my thoughts. Of course, stick around for more Project Gotham in future. And for now, as always, thanks for watching.